Welcome. As you all know, I like to call out dickheads on the internet, and this is the ones we're calling out today.
Oh mate, the V10's a really shit engine.
Why though?
Because trust me bro, I've had one for 5 minutes and therefore I'm an expert.
You gotta take the engine out to stop the tandem pumps leaking. My hand is touching the tandem pump, with plenty of room for activities, and can easily be done with the engine still in.
But the turbos go wrong and you can't replace them without taking the engine out.
Wrong again. Easy access to all the bolts, right down there with simple tools.
The manifolds crack and you can't do it without getting the engine out.
Wrong again. Right there.
You're gonna have electrical problems.
You might have a point there. But not after this episode. Now today is all about tying up loose ends. And no, I'm not talking about all the murders I've committed recently. It means actually finishing off the things that I've started and not finished, of which there are many of, and getting it so that this car can actually drive and not just creep forwards a few meters. That means I have a lot of work to do. We're not going all the way up in the world today because I want to start here with the radiators. More specifically, this one. Now this is my power steering cooler. This is my power steering hose. As you can see, this hose doesn't fit. Now everything else is plumbed up. We've got the feed going from the power steering pump into the power steering box, and this is just the return line or the pressure bleed off, however you want to call it. And basically, fluid goes in there and comes out there. And this is the return that goes back up to the power steering reservoir. So this is going to get a mini montage thing. So, mini adapter. One end goes in there like that. The other end goes like that. Adapted. Now I'll try and anticipate the heroes in the comments section. But this is not going to be under any significant pressure because it's a return line. So this should work okay. Famous last words. So as for power steering, there's only one thing left, which is the return from the cooler back up to the reservoir. So as you can see, this one here is the feed that goes down into the pump. Somewhere under there, that I've got my hand on that you probably can't see, is where all the fluid needs to come back to. It's quite busy down here. So the only course of action I can see that's realistic is to go this way, under the air filter, and down into the depths this way. That was supposed to be depths, by the way. And I'm going to try and use the original factory hose for this, which is the most ideal solution, but it's got this hard line in the way. So I'm going to try and bend this to contour around where I need it to go, which hopefully is only going to need one bend here to bring all this down to where it needs to go. So let's try it. So it turns out if you use a pipe bender that's not the correct size, it becomes a pipe splitter. This is now useless. But on the plus side, it has some of the angles that I need, so I'm going to cut this off cleanly here. Isn't it great when something goes wrong and ends up better than you expected it in the first place? Now what this means is that I can just reach up here and touch the end of that pipe, put a length of flexi hose, bring it down here, and then just connect it to that radiator. It's going to be bloody easy. Now I was going to call it a day because I didn't have any hose, but then I miraculously found this on my shelf. And this is where I'm going to be an absolute hypocrite. Because if you don't have any writing on your hose, don't use it. Because it's probably cheap, crap, unrated rubbish. And in the real world, you wouldn't use this unbranded, unmarked crap. But I'm going to be a hypocrite because this is a return line that's not really under any pressure. As long as it doesn't leak, I don't care. But if I remember, I'm going to replace this later on, because I don't really like cutting corners like this. Power steering, done. And I can mark that off the imaginary list that I have. So the engine cooling system is basically done now. And this has been a bloody horrible job. Mostly because I have regular person-sized hands. And I can't even begin to show this on video because I can barely even get my hands to touch the bits that I was playing with. But it's done. Another thing that was disgracefully difficult to do were these two that come out of the back of the engine and go straight into the heater core in the cabin. Heater core. This is my heater core. Basically, all a heater core does is heats up air using your engine's coolant. Inside here is a weird little radiator, and you can choose whether or not air flows through it. And it looks crap, so I'm going to change that. And now, they look lovely again. Apart from you. You're still filthy. Anyway, how this works is all about luxury and keeping you comfortable while you drive. So all the air is sucked in through this side. There's a big fan on the back. There's the blades. And that air comes in here and is pushed up here, which is then forced through the air conditioning condenser, whether it's active or not. And after that, it comes in this side and is forced out wherever you choose to divert it. Now get out of here, filth. Now today I'm only fussed about this one because this is the one that contains the heater core, as you can see right there. And before I took out the dash on this car, I may have done some terrible things with these inlets and outlets. So let's hope that still works. If it doesn't, I'm going to be sad. Maybe this is the better angle to see what I've had to do with this. So I've got two outlets that come from the engine, and I've made these pipes that kind of direct the flow where I need them to go. They both converge into one point and go through the bulkhead here. And the other end of these little 90-degree bits is where it goes onto the heat exchanger. But this is the only one that's important today because it's the only one that actually contains coolant. And this is a slightly scary job, because I have to anticipate this. A really, really, really insane amount of wiring that may potentially stop it from fitting where it's supposed to go. Not yet. So assuming it fits and I don't have to cut out copious amounts of wires, once that thing is fitted, I should be able to add some coolant and drive this properly. And this is where the fear sets in. Don't worry, I'm not going to be climbing around trees and throwing things at you. And a lot of this wiring is simply not needed. It's safe to assume that everything on this side can be chopped off. The only bits that I need on this side are the ones that go down into the gearbox and transfer case and do all the controlling electric-y things in there. And on this side, a lot of the stuff can be taken away for the second battery. All I really need is the supply and the solenoid on there. So with a bit of visual streamlining, you can basically assume that everything south of this battery can be chopped off, losing about 3 kilos of wiring, and everything south of the transfer case controls can also be chopped off, saving about 6 kilos of wiring. But to just chop this off willy-nilly would be silly. And this is because of CAN bus. Now CAN bus is essentially the devil in electronics form. These are not simple circuits like you'd expect to see on your average crap car, which means that you have to approach it a little bit differently. Rather than thinking of it as circuitry, you have to think of it as like a computer network. Everything's talking to each other. And what this essentially means is that data is going to be running up here as well as down. So if I start chopping things off, I'm going to be losing signal to various things up and down this little circuit here. And the solution is that I'm going to have to unwrap all of these wires individually, trace them all the way back to that fuse box right in the footwell there, and make sure that anything important running on this circuit is still in a maintained circuit. This side is probably going to be a little bit easier, because this is just fat wires. These do act like regular wires. But all of this stuff, as well as this stuff, and there's twice as much of you, so you get two. Unfortunately, I think it's time for this. Now this is going to take a little bit of planning. Here's my plan board thing. I have decided that getting all the lights and stuff to work on this car is a stupid idea, so I'm not going to do it. And this is a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that I can just use all the GQ wiring that I took out in the first place, because luckily I didn't destroy the wiring loom when I did that. The bad thing is, I can't use the flappy paddle gearbox and all the funky controls. Not very happy about this, but it's a bit of a compromise. So basically, rip out all the wiring for the lights and controls, as well as everything that doesn't directly operate the engine and its associated auxiliaries, and hopefully be left with enough space that I can fit more wiring in its place. That's 30 years old. So. How's that for nightmare fuel? And so far, I've removed about 5 kilos of wiring stuff. I haven't even started yet. And what I have to do is choose a plug, hopefully not at random, follow it all the way back to the fuse box, and chop it off if I can. Then repeat the process, once or twice. Okay, maybe 3 or 4, quite a lot of times. But as a distraction, I'll add a fluid, just to get you off the wiring exercise. Back to wiring. I've just discovered something quite good. When I first bought this car, it had a problem where the rear amplifier wasn't working, and in turn, the windscreen wipers didn't work, obviously. And in all of my messing around, I've managed to find this single broken wire. So hopefully, if you're having the same issue, now you know exactly how to fix it. Extremely bloody simple. So it's finished. This took me 2 weeks. And to the untrained eye, it probably doesn't really look that different. Including when you get to the back and see that most of the stuff looks like it's still there. Now I would say that each one of these wires took between 2 and 10 minutes to fully trace and cut off at the source. There's probably enough here to make 5 or 6 wiring loops for your average car. But sadly, the entire process hasn't all been dog snouts and possum paws. Let me show you. Now this is where the driver's seat should go. On the Touareg, there's a driver's seat here. And underneath are all of these connectors. Now I stupidly assumed these were for the electric seats and the seat memory function. But then when I stripped these wires, I noticed that both of these plugs go to the transfer case and gearbox. This means that when I shifted on the remains of my car, I left the transfer case and gearbox controllers still attached to the driver's seat, which would quite nicely explain this bit from when I first drove the car. I would have driven a lot further, but I think I have a problem with the selector stick in the middle. And I'm guessing it's mostly because I forgot to disconnect it when I dropped the engine. And so now I have the fun job of finding these two units and getting them coded to the ECUs of this car. Let's not forget the real reason why we did all this wiring nonsense. It's almost like I planned this. So in conclusion to today's episode, we finished the cooling system and the power steering system and learned that it takes over 2 weeks of wiring to fit a heater core, as well as generating enough electrical waste to make several robotic birds happy. But that's enough garbling for today. Come back next time, when this thing will get its first proper maiden voyage for more than 30 seconds. We'll also find out if I am really the Silver Shroud.
Galaxy News Radio.
When evil walks the streets of Boston, one man lurks in the shadows, shielding the innocent, judging the guilty. That guardian is the Silver Shroud. Today's episode, a slaying and